welcome to Lōkahi Backstage. I am your host, Ann Blakeman. Here, we go beyond the highlight reel and bring you stories from real people, those who have faced ups and downs, challenges and breakthroughs. Through their stories, my hope is that you'll be inspired to embrace your journey, find the rainbows in the storm, and always remember, your uniqueness is your magic. Hey, como mai, welcome. Today's guest is someone who combines law, leadership, creativity, and kindness in a truly one-of-a-kind way. Ben Graff is a partner at Quarles & Brady, where he leads the firm's national land use and zoning practice. Ben has become one of Arizona's most respected voices in zoning, advocacy, and municipal relations. He's also a Regent Emeritus of the Arizona Board of Regents and on the Board of Directors for Valley Partnership. He currently serves as an elected official on the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board of Directors, where he helps oversee policy decisions for nearly 40% of Arizona's water supply. Ben is a husband, a proud dad to 2 daughters, a stand-up comic, a musician, and an artist with a style he calls urban decay. And through it all, he's someone who deeply values connection and community. If you've ever thought, can I really do it all with heart, humor, and purpose? This one's for you. Let's dive in. I would like to welcome Ben Graff in the studio today for Lōkahi Backstage. I'm super excited to have you here. And where I got to know Ben was through Valley Partnership's Board of Directors.
Yes.
But through that, I realized you have such an amazing story, and I can't wait to share it with our audience today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. I'm so excited. So let's start your story. Let's start when you were 11 years old. You say that there was a critical moment that happened in your life that really, I would say, almost set up everything in your life, from professionally to running for office, and even like the person you are today and who you choose to even be as a dad. So take us back to that time.
Sure. Your listeners might be concerned if we start when I'm 11. They're like, is this going to be a 4-hour podcast, right?
No, but that's great.
Yeah, no, 11 was a critical year for me. My parents were divorced that year. And unfortunately and fortunately, it was a situation where actually I needed and wanted my parents to be divorced. So I had grown up in a household with an abusive alcoholic father, and this is something a lot of people don't know about me. That kind of from birth till 11, was a tough time living in that household, and it got to the point where my mom was able to finally put a stop to it, to kind of stop that cycle. Mm-hmm. My father's father was also abusive, so there had been a long line of, I guess, the Graff men, if you will, having issues with substance abuse, having issues with domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And so at that 11-year age mark, I was finally kind of separated from that. So I was in 5th grade and was finally kind of moving into a realm where I was free of that. And it was a pivotal point because I think my lack of confidence in what was happening at home was mirrored at elementary school. Mm-hmm. It was more quiet, probably more of a target for bullies, definitely not ready to push myself out into the world. And then that time that I started to have with just my core family, which was my mom, my sister, we ended up becoming a really tight family. And I started to find my confidence then. When that wasn't happening at home, I started to find my confidence. And I started to find, even as silly as it sounds, in 5th and 6th grade and so on, an interest in public service, an interest in being, more involved in school, running for student government, that type of thing. So that was a very, very pivotal moment. And as you mentioned, it also started to shape exactly the father and husband that I wanted to be in the future. Maybe I didn't know that at the time, but certainly we see instruction in our life and we point out things of who we want to be. And then we also pull from things and we know we don't want to be that, or well, I'll never do that. Yeah. So a lot of my structure of who I am as a father comes from all these things I never want to do or never want to be. And then, of course, all the more positive things, the proactive, this is the kind of dad I want to be, person I want to be, those kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, your microphone's funny how it's dropping.
I can handle it. It's all good.
I think it's really interesting to me how you say during that time frame your interest in public service. So like, I think that's interesting how that I think it's interesting how you say that you were wanting your parents to be divorced. So I guess it shows how much, even at that age, you already determined that this isn't good. And even as much as you want a complete family of a mom and a dad, I think everyone wants that. I would think that it was like a better choice to not have a complete family, right?
Right.
What people see as a complete family.
It isn't always a good thing to have a mom, dad, and a full family. It depends on who the mom and dad are.
Yeah.
And I think that's lost sometimes. Yeah. So
like choosing the better, like realizing that's such a young age to me to process, like in that maturity,
right?
In that to say, and I think that says so much about you to even take that moment that could be seen as a very negative thing, but you were like, okay, now we can move forward as a strong family, and let yourself at that point like soar. I think you allowed yourself to see who you were made to be, and allowed yourself to see the passions that were embedded within you from even those ages.
Yeah, exactly.
That's such a young age. That's so amazing. So, okay. So you said this led to your interest in realizing that you had a desire for public service. So in middle school, you said that was the first time that you ran, right, for student government?
Yeah, I actually did start running in elementary school.
Oh, okay.
I lost in 5th grade to Jason Childress. I have no idea where he is, but he ran an awesome 5th grade campaign. He nailed it. And then 6th grade, I did do the kind of the class rep thing. But yeah, in middle school, I kind of put it all out there and decided that I wanted to be the student body president of Kokopah Middle School here in the Phoenix Scottsdale area. It was a full campaign from a elementary school standpoint. And I worked with my mom on my big speech. And my mom's a great writer, amazing sense of humor, kind of instilled all of that in me. And we put that together, and somehow I pulled it off. And so that was the real start of my interest in balancing school or work or whatever it may be with some level of public service, because I just fell in love with it. I loved it. At that time it's like you're all about knowing how the dance got decorated before the dance happened, right? But that's the equivalent now of like knowing about how water policy is being made in Arizona before the public and those types of things. I mean, it's the same thing. It's being behind the scenes and figuring out how to help, your fellow students or your fellow citizens. It's an addicting, reciprocal feeling that you get back for being a public servant. And so, yeah, I think from that point on, I got pretty hooked on it.
I think that's so true. Like I never really thought about it that way. I kind of think about like not wanting to be front and center on. I don't love being front and center on a lot of things, but it does give you a lot of folks. I would say in general have a lot of opinions about, right? We all have opinions of like they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that, or why are they doing this, or why are they doing that? But then now people don't realize all behind the scenes what's happening. And it's not as, I tend to feel, it's not as manipulative as people think, like they're doing it because of this or that. There's reasons why things are being done, and people are working hard behind the scenes to get stuff done. And there's reasons why things shift. So it gives you like, there's, more behind what's happening versus like making theories,
right?
Philosophizing. And a lot of times when people are making their own theories, it's so far from reality, I would say. So now you're closer to that, and you get to be part of that.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you talk a lot about your mom. She obviously was a huge person in your life, a huge role model. Tell us more about the influence your mom had on you.
Yeah, it was and still is. So my mom is still at the house right at 42nd Street in Shea that I grew up on.
Oh, okay.
Or grew up in. And, she's grandma to our 2 daughters and has always been there. But yeah, my mom is, she's retired now, but my mom's a psychologist. She had her own private practice throughout her entire life here in Arizona, and was always just an amazing, solid role model for my sister and for me, and guided us through all that. I think one thing that my mom did for us, which, it's embarrassing that even as a kid, maybe I didn't notice it at the time, but looked back very quickly, is when we first left my father, we moved into a very small apartment, and my mom couldn't fathom each of us not having our own rooms, even though like we were the kids, like it shouldn't, that didn't have to be the priority.
Sure.
And so my mom put my sister in a room and put me in a room so that we would have our own rooms. And then my mom slept on the couch.
Wow.
My mom slept on the couch for like 2 years, just to give us our own rooms, because she was trying to create calmness and steadiness and those types of things. And I noticed it at the time. I'm not saying I wasn't a sixth grader that didn't notice my mom was sleeping on the couch, but it's like you look back and you realize as a parent like what she was doing. And of course I can understand now those types of things. And she didn't need to do that. But like those types of things, I mean, she was just always there. And then, you know, she raised us on a single income and was a single mom, and but has always been, you know, very inspiring. And my mom's hilarious. She's very funny. And her mother too, her mother, my grandmother had a mouth. I mean, the types of words and phrases that came out of my grandmother, they wouldn't fly well in church. Let's just say that.
That's so funny, but sometimes those are the funnest
they were the
things,
best.
though, right?
They were the best.
It's the color behind the scenes that you're like, that person's so hilarious.
Yes.
And like, I always think like I don't really love cussing, because I think it's a negative thing. But then when it's used in humor, that is the most appropriate.
Yes.
And there's nothing better than like an absolutely perfectly placed cuss word. You're like, that is hilarious.
Yes. Or this dainty 85-year-old lady walking in and then dropping some phrase. It's just like, whoa.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that.
Yes.
That cuss word at that moment in time, I'm like, bring it in. Bring it in. There's no other way.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that a lot of the humor clearly came from that side of the family. So
I love it. I love that you have humor, and I one day need to see you do all that stuff. But anyway, okay. So you have 2 daughters, like you just mentioned, a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. You said recently you were explaining to them that it's more important to try and fail numerous times. And so that makes me think about kind of your college time frame. You shared some situations that were setbacks, but really blessings in disguise, right?
Sure.
So can you share a little more about what that is?
Yeah. I mean, I think up until my senior year at the University of Arizona, I think I was kind of on a roll. You know, we all have times in our lives where we're on a roll, and then we all have setbacks and gut punches and all those things. And I was on a roll, and I hadn't really experienced, a big failure. I was graduating from the University of Arizona as the student body president there, and had just loved every second of that. That was like a full-time job on top of going to school. I'd literally traveled all over the country representing the university, and it was just an amazing experience for a 21-year-old. And then I had applied for this job with this group called the Arizona Students Association. So it was a professional organization that was ran by professional non-students, but they actually, the executive director and the other positions served the students. So it was an interesting position where the job you go for as executive officer, your boss is a board of college students. And so I had been on that board supervising an adult that was in charge of the organization. And then I was saying, you know what, this position would be perfect for me. And it would allow me to do state and federal lobbying on tuition and all these things. So there was a big pool of individuals. It came down to 2. This was all my eggs in one basket. I did not have another plan for after undergrad for a job. I was very confident I would get this. Came down to myself and one other candidate, and they picked the other candidate right around graduation. And it was that first gut punch, right?
Yeah.
That first failure, and kind of was just swimming in the abyss because I didn't know what was next. And I was seeing around me everyone who had that next plan or got the internship in DC and, did all these things. And this job just didn't work out. So that, required me to recalibrate. And looking back, those recalibrations are such important points in our life where we should be forced to do that and reprioritize. And so I actually ended up doing kind of a smorgasbord of jobs I took 2 years off. I first worked for a year at Child Protective Services. So I was a case manager for Child Protective Services. My undergraduate degree was psychology with poli-sci and pre-law. So I did have a lot of the psychology, and so I worked as a case manager. I was my starting salary was $17,500.
I think that's still the salary.
Yeah. And so I was working at restaurants at night. So I was working at the Melting Pot serving fondue. Yeah. So fondue serving at night at the Melting Pot, working at Child Protective Services during the day. And then toward the end of the first year, I got an opportunity to work on my first political campaign. And that was awesome. That was it was a statewide campaign. I got the opportunity to travel all over the state working on a political campaign. And that was a really amazing experience while I was doing all that. Just fun note about that job I didn't get, because most people would never get an experience like this, but we've all failed to get a job and somebody else has gotten it, or we've responded to an RFP and another company has gotten it. Well, in this case, and it's not funny, but it's also the reality of what happened. It was about 5 years after I didn't get that job with the Arizona Students Association and the other guy did.
Right.
That the other guy was arrested for embezzling over $400,000 from the organization.
Oh my goodness.
So sometimes in life they pick someone else and you can play in your mind why you thought you were the better candidate, but maybe they'll do fine. Yeah. This was a solid moment where I could have been the better candidate. All I had to do was not steal $400,000.
There you go.
And I would have been a better candidate.
But he had a bigger salary though.
Yes.
He walked away at $400 more than you would have.
That's right. So that was kind of one of those interesting things where years later you're like, oh, okay, they really didn't pick the right person for that job, but oops. But in
the meantime, you made good of that because you found new passions and it taught you new things.
Yes.
So I always think that that's such a great time. Like you said, the setbacks are such great times to reset rather than kind of look at it and not make much of that moment in time. Yes, you didn't get to be the embezzlement guy, but you got to do other things, right?
Right.
So, okay, so and this might be jumping way far ahead. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit about what led you to become a zoning attorney, because I feel like my next thing I would jump in a little ahead of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that came from another moment that felt like a failure, right? So, graduated law school in 2006. I had a job lined up at a local law firm. I had done my summer programs there, and I had an offer to do with something that I thought was going to be a really good blend of my talents and what my interests were. Quite frankly, in law school, the standard practices weren't fitting me, and it was causing a bit of panic because maybe I could have been really good at litigation, but the zero-sum game of litigation, and I think the outright contentiousness of it, it didn't fit my personality. The more contractual side of forming and making a perfect contract. I have colleagues at my law firm at Quarles and Brady that are brilliant at this, but that's just not me. I need the people aspect involved in that. Yeah. So some practices were not fitting me, but I found at one firm this government relations section, which was focused on the state legislature and the governor, where you would join the firm and you would help write new legislation, through the legislature and lobby the governor and the legislature to make better laws for the state. And I said, okay, this sounds awesome. This is all I ever want to do. Joined the firm, started the job, took me to lunch my first week, and they said, oh, wait, by the way, that government relations job, we don't need you in that anymore. We're going to put you over here in this environmental defense litigation group. And I mean, just rug pulled out, right? No.
But you already committed to the job.
Already committed.
Under the certain.
Took the bar, passed the bar. I had no other job lined up. And I didn't get fired, but I just got.
Like, we're shimmying you over.
Yeah. I had done my last year in law school, I had done an internship for that firm at the state legislature. I had moved back up to Phoenix because I was living in Tucson. So I had done a whole internship at the legislature just for this firm to be ready for this for this legislative, position.
Role. Yeah.
And so I got thrown in this. And so for a year, I just felt like I was sinking. I wasn't doing the kind of work I loved. I wasn't connecting with people. I wasn't connecting with clients. And I pulled myself out of that through finding mentors. And so by finding mentors and people I could talk to, I spent a year doing my work at the firm, but also knowing that I needed to move on quickly.
Yeah.
And so about a year after that position had started, I was able to actually have a really odd week where two separate mentors that did not know each other, each independent of each other, said, have you ever thought about being a zoning lawyer? And if yes, I'd like to introduce you to some local zoning lawyers. And so I took that to heart and kind of learned a little bit more about why these folks, I mean, there was a zoning law course at the University of Arizona Law School that I didn't even take. I mean, it wasn't on my radar in 2006. And here I am contemplating maybe jumping into this world in 2007. And so I got introduced to Larry Lazarus, who's an iconic zoning attorney still practicing today. He and his daughter, Carrie Sullivan, work in Tucson, Phoenix. And Larry brought me on board in 2007. And I started to train under Larry. And then equally as important, 3 land planners. So there's Lyle Richardson, Marcy Rosenberg, and George Pasquale. And those 4 fully trained me out over those years. And so that was, and in the moment I went to my first village planning committee hearing, my first city council hearing, and presented a case on a beneficial development for Arizona, I was hooked.
I love that.
I had a lot to learn in 2007 on the real estate side because I hadn't been practicing that, but the political side, the getting up in front of groups, talking to people, advocating, getting to know mayors, council members, planning directors, planning staff, traffic engineers, all the above, right?
Yeah.
And I got hooked. I loved it. Yeah.
I love it. I love when people are doing or sitting in the spaces that they can truly say like they were addicted from the moment they stepped into those roles. And so I'm happy for folks when I hear that. But you also mentioned something that Larry mentions to you, which I think is so funny because as the engineers, we are the ones that don't love talking. I always love the fact that there's a zoning attorney on the case and they love being front and center. And I am more than happy to be the person behind the scenes that helps you succeed being front and center. But you said he told you, learn when to sit down
and shut up. And shut up. One of the best things Larry Lazarus taught me was we were at a hearing and you put together these massive presentations. You might have 30 slides. You come up with all these brilliant arguments and counter arguments to the neighbors. But if you walk into that room, and as you learn to in this job, and you read that council or that board, and you watch their body language and things like that, which, by the way, during COVID was such a downside because like we become experts in reading that room, and it was so much harder virtually. But side note, but we get the feeling that we've got this. We're going to win this case. Larry taught me, like in those situations, you may have all these wonderful things to say, but you need to sit down and shut up because we then observed during my very young years as a zoning attorney, other zoning lawyers, other professionals who just were so excited about what they had to talk about that they just started to kind of have that, verbal uncontrolled discussion and then there'd be something they say, and then you'd just right there, you'd see a council member say, I didn't know about that. Tell me more about that. And then the case would be lost where it would have been won. So yes, learning when to shut up and sit down is a big, especially so I like to talk. I'm a talker. I could talk in front of a council for hours. So I've always had to train myself to know what's important to say and what's not important to say. So you got to be careful.
So true. I also think like we are in the business of people, right? And at the end of the day, I always think the win is when I always think the win is when everybody's happy. And the goal is always to make everybody happy, I would say, is like whether it's the developer, your client, right? The team, the council, the neighbors, the goal is everyone being happy. So I feel like reading a room or knowing folks is such beyond our technical side of what we know. It's truly I think that's what makes people great in this profession is understanding when we've met the people's needs, whoever the people are, all the people, right? At the end of the day, right? It's a people science. I always say I'm in a science and I'm good at math, but it's also blending the people side of it.
Agreed.
Okay, so although in middle school or even you say elementary school was where you started to think about student government and public service, and you obviously took that up through your college career, right? You were president of the university, for the class. But then at that point in time, 15 years had gone by.
Yep.
And you hadn't done any more of running for office.
I had not.
So So what happened there and what led you? But you are currently sitting in an elected position. So obviously something changed.
Yes.
But there was a 15-year break in that time frame. So talk to me about that.
So I think that's a lesson in kind of like following your dreams and just not procrastinating on them. Because I think as soon as I graduated, I knew I wanted to serve in public office in Arizona. Kind of in the real world. And
so you knew that right when you graduated college?
I knew it right away.
Huh,
yeah.
Okay.
I knew it right away. But as we all do, we get bogged down with our careers and the career path and trying to get that first job. And I told you how tumultuous those first 2 years were. Now, I did get to work on a political campaign, and that actually is for anyone that's ever interested in running for office, I highly recommend go volunteer for a campaign and get as involved as you can, because that's where you start to see how it's done. And so that was a smart thing. So at least I made that step the second year after undergrad before law school, and had continued to be involved in some campaigns. But running for office myself was something that I did just kind of continuously put off. Law school came, and then my legal career started, and then, learning to be a zoning lawyer started. And it just always seemed to be the wrong time. And it actually was another mentor that was in political office, a gentleman named Patrick McWhorter, who I went to lunch with, and I was like, I don't know when I'm going to do this. And he goes, you do know there's never a good time to run for office. He's like, you're never going to find the right time where, where there aren't things going on with your kids or your family or your job isn't busy. It's just a zero-sum game if you do it or you don't. And I think after that conversation, I realized like it was time for me to do that. And that was about 2015. So I evaluated a lot of different options. I really wanted to be impactful. I didn't want to stop my zoning practice either, because I really do love what I do, and I wanted it to be compatible, not in conflict with my day job, if you will. And so I looked at a few different options. There were some school board positions that were coming up. There were definitely positions at the state legislature. And then I was introduced to a gentleman named Jim Hallway, who was, and also I already knew Terry Goddard, but Terry Goddard was also on the Central Arizona Project Board. Went to lunch with them, and they basically discussed with me this opportunity to run for the Central Arizona Project Board and be hyper-focused on protecting Arizona's Colorado River water. And, it doesn't sound sexy from like a 10,000-foot level, but yet it was and has become the quintessential key issue in Arizona, in my opinion. And to my surprise, in my now second term, this position has not only taken me throughout Arizona government and the governor's office and the legislature, but our team at CAP has met with the White House. We've met with Congress. We've continued to push for Arizona's water needs. So that's been my journey to the current position that I serve in. And I don't practice water law in my professional capacity. It's two different buckets, completely separate. But that's really allowed me to be in my elected office, my service, and also, my day job.
So turning back to yourself, your younger self, graduating and always having that passion and desire, what would you tell that younger self person?
Sure. I think I personally, as most of us really think about it, I don't want to change the path or tweak my path, but I do think telling my younger self to do more things that scare you in the moment. Don't wait for those things to become familiar, because they never will. If they're scaring you then, they're going to scare you later, and that probably is an indication it's a good thing for you to try to do. And I think also just it's okay to balance things. I mean, there's nothing more important to me than the core of my family time and my family, but it is also okay to have a job and to work, and it's also okay to follow a passion like running for office and to create kind of a balance there. And I've been able to involve my family in that. My kids have helped me campaign. They're out there. They talk about water. They know what Daddy does. When we drive by a CAP canal, my girls will say, "That's Daddy's water," and I'm like, "Well, not quite. But you're getting it, right?
Yes.
That is the canal that we work on, right?"
Yes.
So I think some of those things I definitely would advise my younger self.
I think too, like I would say, even right when you have so many things that are going on, a lot of folks are saying like the work-life, I don't know, people are still around the work-life balance, and I do a lot of work. And so I always think though, like you said, like your family, and even I would say my family, and what they've gotten to see as a result of work, and you bring them alongside with what you do, right? They get to see what you're doing. And I think I become a better parent as a result, because your kids are able to see and experience things that if you kind of just always made hard lines in life of like, these are buckets, and you don't stretch yourselves even for your dreams.
Right.
When your kids see that Dad set out a goal. Dad set out some things he wanted to do. He always wanted to be in office. He did do it. Like they see you doing the things that you said you wanted to do. And then you bring them along in that journey. I think that sparks something even within your kids to say like, I have something I want to do. It helps them to not settle and say like, yes, one day, someday, my dad had a dream and my dad felt he could balance this all and he found a way. I have a dream. I'm going to balance it all too. Like, I really do think it speaks a lot. And my kids are older than your kids. Like mine are in their 20s. So they're starting to like define their adulthood. Like who do they want to become and what is their careers? And all of my kids, I would say they talk like that rather than just a profession, but they're landing their first job. So of course they're happy to just get paid right now. Like at some point you just want a job and get paid.
Right.
But I know all my kids say like, this is not where I intend on staying. Like not necessarily the company, but like they're seeing their future trajectory. Like this is only step one. And they clearly see that they have more steps ahead and they want more steps ahead, versus just like the linear route. So I think it's a great thing when you lean into that.
Yeah.
I think it's a great thing for your whole family too. And I think it creates you to be a better overall person, even a better dad.
Right. Right. My kids wouldn't want to see me laying on the couch all day long. Right. They'd want to see me doing these things that make me feel passionate and bringing that home and talking to them about it.
Yeah. I guess so. That's true. Right. Like, so although you're home and you're not working, but then you're like, what are you doing? Versus like you're out there.
And I have couch days.
Yes.
I mean, there's some significant.
It's so important.
There's some significant couch time on Saturdays and Sundays with the kids. I'm not. Yeah. No.
There has to be. That's the only way. I would love to go back to. I know this is kind of jumping out of order, but you shared with me a story in 2008, like during the downturn, and yes, I really appreciated that story. Would you mind sharing some of that, or how much of that you would want to share? Yeah.
No, and it's funny because as I've talked to people about this when I was younger, this was something I wouldn't have wanted anyone to know about.
Yes.
How could a real estate lawyer, a zoning lawyer, lose their house in the recession, right? And I've been able to really come to realize that I was in my 20s, I was right out of law school, sure, I was a kid. B, the things that happened in 2008 through 2011, that was not my fault. That was not a lot of people's fault. That was completely unprecedented. Mm-hmm. And you have to realize when I graduated law school in 2006, it was the buy push, right? Yeah. Like if you're not buying, the market is skyrocketing. Every day you don't buy, you're missing out on equity. Yeah. And you've got this you got this new salary, you're working at a firm. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I bought our first house at the peak in 2006. Right. And we saw that house lose its value by more than 50%, by 2010, 2011.
And you even explained like your work, right? Like your workload was like bang, 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 so much, like you couldn't get it done fast enough to, what do we have anything to do anything?
I mean, for people that have not truly experienced a recession, some of the younger folks that were lucky enough to miss that and are kind of coming up now, or prior recessions in the 80s and things like that, it's an unbelievable experience, especially in the real estate market. I mean, we went from, in my zoning firm at the time, we went from being, like you said, incredibly busy mm-hmm. to I would walk in the door, I would ask the lawyer, any work, any call, has anyone called? And the answer would be no. And then I'd sit in my office for 8 hours that day trying to figure out what else to do. And then maybe a case would come in, we'd all get together, get that work done, but it wasn't enough to keep things up. So salaries are dropping drastically. Yep. Income was dropping drastically. The number of staff we had was dropping drastically. Yep. Nightmare situation. So my wife and I in 2010, 2011 went back into renting. And, at the time I felt like, I was a failure. Like I felt like this was some dark secret. How could this happen? Again, like I said, I'm a real estate lawyer. How could I ever let anyone know that this happened to us? It has to be this big dark secret. But we really blossomed out of that. And it also helped us recalibrate a much more mature understanding of budgeting, living within your means. Not that all of that could have, staved off what happened in the recession, but just really understanding that these things do happen. You need to have that rainy day fund. You need to be able to live within your means. Don't buy the biggest house at the craziest interest rate. Wait for the right time. And so we definitely recalibrated from that. But I think that affected a lot of the advice we give our kids and everything like that. And certainly it set me on a different path, to where we are today. And it's drastically different. And I feel very stable today. And I feel very grateful for that. And now I'm in a way glad we did experience that in the way we did.
Yeah.
So
I always think my husband and I started out very poor. Very, there's times where our bank account was, I remember $17 left. We paid the bills, right? But once you paid the bills, you're like, there's $17 left till we get paid in 5 days or whatever it is. And I look back and I always say we were always happy. I never look back at that and think we were sad. We always found happiness in the midst of it. If we didn't have much, literally, I remember he would love to buy a soda from I don't know, QT for 89 cents. And I was like, we don't have 89 cents. When you have $17, 89 cents is a big portion of $17. So, but I look back and that was early on in our marriage. And I know that everything that we go through now, mind you, life has changed financially, right? But I know we have what it takes to go back to that. No matter what happens, and there's still joy and happiness and everything. And we could, if need be, we could go right back to that and rebuild. I don't know, just knowing it in your heart. That's never happened yet, but I know in the depths of my core that I could do it.
Right.
And we have what it takes to do it together.
Because you established who you are as a couple, who you are as a family.
What we value.
Before that success, that wasn't how that was defined. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd love to dig into one more thing. You talk about all the balance, dad, career, right, running for office, but even beyond that, there's even more surprises. You love stand-up comedy, and you actually do it. You love arts and creative pottery, right? Is it called industrial?
Yeah.
Art?
So we can talk about I guess we can talk about the art first. So yeah, it's a form of art. I don't think I made this up, but it's called urban decay.
Okay.
And so it started with a silly project, I think in 2016, that I was just trying to do for my wife for Mother's Day. And I was just going to pour some cement into a container, and I was going to get the little cute handprints of my daughters at the time and write out the date. And so we did it. It was cute. We still have it, just real a kindergarten type project, right?
Sure.
And I ended up with this extra bag of cement. And I just started, for completely unknown reasons, I do tinker a lot in the garage in general, but I just started to tinker with cement. And then I started to form it in different molds and shapes, learning, different things. Cement's, this could be the most boring part of the podcast. I don't know, but cement's actually really fascinating. It's a chemistry. It's a chemistry project, and the folks in our industry that are in construction know a lot more about it than me. But there's all kinds of things you can do and chemicals you can add that change colors, change strength, change flexibility. A lot of things you can do with it. So I kind of became a nerd of this, and I eventually started combining these kind of pillars of cement with what it would look like what if you had a pillar from a building, and what if it had been an apocalyptic type thing, and over time, nature and the earth had kind of started to decay that piece of art. And so the art is manipulated in a way so that it reveals things like the underlying steel within the art that is now rusted and kind of gone away. And then the thing I always add is a live plant. So I have it so that it looks as if this has been taken over by nature. And I have no idea what I'm doing, why I do it. It's incredibly relaxing. I love it. Some people like the pieces. I've never sold a piece. I've never done a show. Some people have asked me to do that.
I think it looks really cool.
But it's really relaxing. I love making these pieces. So yeah, it's therapeutic if anything. Right?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. But then, okay, talk about stand-up comedy.
Yes. So that was a bucket list thing. So I've been meaning to do that for a very long time. I've been writing jokes and kind of some comedy stuff on my little Apple phone notes, app for a decade. I've been just, when things hit me funny, I write it down, and I think maybe someday I'll use it. So I've always had kind of like a material base, I look back at it, 80% of it is crap, but every once in a while I'm like, actually that was funny. And then in 2018, I got randomly asked to do an opening set at the Tempe Improv, which is one of the more iconic.
For sure. Yeah, that's a legit.
I mean, if you're going to do it,
legit
like
improv.
The Tempe Improv.
Yes,
and,
definitely.
And it was just kind of random. And somebody said, we need a slot. If, I thought you said you might be interested in this. And I was horrified at the time. I kept saying I should have said no, but I very intentionally said yes. And I said yes immediately and committed myself to it. And then I had about a week to prepare. And it went surprisingly well. I had a really fun time. Kind of learned a lot that night about the rhythm with the audience. Like you can write jokes, but if you actually make the audience laugh, it's like a conversation. You have to listen to the other person to know the right thing to say. And so if you just run through your jokes and you're not listening even to the laughter, you can get off a rhythm. So learned a lot that night and then started doing it a little bit more. I've never done anything more than like a 10 or 15 minute set, usually like for an opening act. I've performed at the DC Live and Desert Ridge, or CB Live and Desert Ridge, and a couple smaller shows. But yeah, and a lot of it's just observational humor about life, crazy things my kids do. A lot of them are just real stories that that pop up. But yeah, it's fun, and I do incorporate and always have incorporated humor actually into my professional life. We, you and I walk into the same rooms sometimes together on the same project. And these can be very serious rooms, right?
For sure.
And a client doesn't want you walking in and being a clown either, but there's a balance of how you can strategically lower. And the associates, the young lawyers that work with me, have commented on it. They were like, "Hey, that room was stiff, and then that joke you made, and then everyone lightened up." And so it is something that I will do carefully, but it does tend to work, and it lets people know that you're not there. Because what I do, I'm not there to sue people.
Right.
I'm not there to burn something down. I'm there to consensus build. And so folks need to see me as approachable. They need to see me as good at my job. They need to see me as somebody that's going to fight, and fight just for everything my client needs. But I need to be approachable, and there's other zoning lawyers out there, and I want these cities to want to work with me. So it's, again, you can't be silly. These are multi-million dollar projects, and you're not walking in, again, being a clown, but there's ways that you can alleviate the atmosphere, right?
I feel like humanize yourself, right? Like I think when you walk in and you walk in, you have a title, you've got a role, right? There's some intimidation factor of like who you are, right? Most of the guys wear like suits or something of that nature that makes them look quite professional at that moment in time, whether, ties or whatever. And so I think turning people into a human, right? Like I don't know, it humanizes you a little bit more versus like this wall of I don't know, scary. I think it can be scary versus saying like, okay, he's a person. Yeah. Right. Okay, so I wanted to share one thing. So this is my sharing on you. So we went out to coffee one day to just get to know each other better and what we do and our history and our background. So you shared a lot of your story. And I shared some of mine, and part of the Lōkahi story, which I still have not, believe it or not, I have this podcast where I'm asking everyone to share their stories, and it's working out my courage to share mine. Believe it or not, I'm asking more out of my guests than I myself have done.
Oh, well, your story Your story is fascinating. Yeah, I loved hearing your story.
Thank
you.
You
should share it.
One day I will. I keep thinking when's the right time. I do want to share it because more importantly to share with others, to inspire others that they can do it too. There's not so much magic behind the scenes. There's a lot more grit and a lot more tough spots that you fall into. But one of the situations, and it kind of doesn't quite lead up into the bigness of this, but due to our circumstances, we had it all wasn't working out the way we had expected, timing, financially, and everything. But we were in this bind where we had no way to turn back. So we were maxing out every single credit card we ever had. We had 3 credit cards at the time. Everything was maxed out. So this is only 5-6 years ago, right? So clearly in my 40s, when we've worked very hard to be financially quite stable, 401ks, savings accounts, like we learned how to be these, we were quite proud of the people we were, enough to give away to folks, right? But at this point in time, we had maxed out every single credit card, which is not what we like doing. And there was not even any, we were even calling them to say like, hey, how much higher can you make the credit card? Yep. And we'd take that extra $2,000 that they'd raised the ceiling. My son went and grabbed my credit card, which they do it if they're, doing stuff for like the family purchasing something. So he had gone down to Crumble and tried to buy one of those sleeve of cookies that might have been like $15, and the credit card declined. My son came home and he didn't even understand what decline was, because my kids, even in their 20s, didn't understand the concept, or I think he might have been in high school, didn't understand that credit cards have limits, because we never lived on limit-based credit cards, right? Where we paid them off, so they didn't ever have to know there was a limit.
Right.
So he's like, I don't know, it didn't work.
Yeah,
so something's wrong with this.
The magic just keeps happening with the credit card.
For sure. Yeah. Like even like the bank account, right? Like this, the ATM, the cash. Like if you just need more money, right, to go to Disneyland, they're like, just go to that machine thing, because it just spits the money out, right? So it's not quite as simple as that. But he came home and he said there was no, this doesn't work. I need another card. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you took the card. Like literally, there's not even like pennies left on it. Like, and obviously there was not even pennies left on it. And at this point, we were maxed on all of our credit cards and couldn't believe like we were at this point where Crumble cookies, we couldn't afford any. But anyway, that was part of my story and continued on. And we gotten far past that and spent an hour or two together and gone on our separate ways. We both had to jump to quick meetings and go through our day. I was back at the office. And then the next thing you know, I've got my office manager knocks on my window of my office because I had it closed being in the meetings. And she's got this stack of Crumble cookies, like a case of them. And I was like, what? And I couldn't pay attention at the time because I was in the middle of a meeting. But as soon as I could get out, I assumed it was like, I don't know, a husband. And I assumed it was my husband, or I didn't know. But I saw the card. And by now, like, our coffee situation was far enough out of my mind and moved away in my day to new things. And it was from you. And it said, from not being able to afford a Crumble cookie to being able to buy as many as you want. That was one of the most thoughtful gifts somebody ever gave to me. And I couldn't believe how you took that story. And that wasn't the whole story. There was so much more to the story, right? It was a moment of the story that you had picked out. And to actually from there, I knew you had a busy day because you had to run, I had to run. And off to the races we go. But to have that delivered, I just couldn't believe it. Just meant so much. And the fact that like you by no means had to do something like that, but it told me so much more about the person that you are. And I thought, man, these are the type of people that are my people. Because I already had the world of respect for you, serving on Valley Partnership Board of Directors. I knew the roles that you held. I knew the attorney that you were. I knew that you were in elected positions. I knew all these great things about you, right? So I already had this great respect for who you were. Now getting more to know about your family, I can only imagine you're a great guy, great dad with your family. But really that next level, like that is game changer life. And I think that's the type of people that I feel I like to surround my world with. And I feel I work with those type of folks, not just those that excel financially or money or degrees. Right. the things that we would check box and say, you're fantastic and great. Because I think you might agree with me too, that at the game that we play, that there's also folks that you look and go, that it doesn't check some of those. They would not send me a crumble cookies. There's no way.
They don't play the game.
They don't live life in that way, right? Like, but I love how that says so much about the person as the giver. I like to think that I like to try to be that person, and I'm always in shock when it's returned, because I don't know. It's just such a great trait and character, I think, as a human being, beyond titles, beyond what you've achieved. It's even a greater achievement. So I guess as we wrap this up, and we've gone through all this, the person that you are, who you are, there's folks out there right now trying to determine their future, turning their next steps. You've accomplished so much, not only just in your career, but I think to the depths, the creativity, the concrete in your shop, to sending crumble cookies to someone like me. What is your advice that you have?
Well, first of all, wow, that was a lot of kindness you just threw at me, and I'm humbled by it and really appreciate it. I think that what happened when you and I had coffee too is, you have coffee with folks, and then you have coffee with folks, and there's a connection. And I think you and I really connected on a lot of different levels, similar experiences. We're in the same industry. We're going to get to work together a lot, which is going to be super fun, more and more together. But I think, what I saw in that story was a willingness to share a vulnerability with me with someone that you didn't really know yet, and maybe didn't even know if you could trust with that vulnerability.
Right.
Similar to my family losing our house, when we did, and for you to have to turn to your son on any given day and say, we can't afford to buy cookies, right? And so it stuck with me too, and I think it's related to the biggest piece of advice that you're asking me to give to other folks and everything, which is, if you're in a conversation with someone, you really need to listen. Like you really need to listen to what the other person is saying and what they're sharing with you and telling you, because from that you can pull some of the most important audible things, but you can pull a lot of inaudible, mannerism, things like that are coming from the person as well. And I think if I hadn't listened to you that morning, I would have missed this. I think what I know was that you said it in a few seconds, but I could pick up on what that moment meant. So I was very excited to send you the cookies and just let you know that I recognized what you had shared with me, that vulnerability, and that what it also meant as a symbol for what you've accomplished. I mean, your audience can only see this room, but I just got to see your whole beautiful office that you own, everything you've accomplished. This is just an amazing spot, and I can tell your employees must just love it here. So, but yeah, I think we failed to listen. Especially, we were having a nice conversation. I have a lot of conversations that aren't so great, right? I have conversations with neighbors that hate our projects. I have conversations with council members who are really concerned about the political implications of what we're trying to do, and they're expressing their concerns. If I'm just assuming they're wrong and I'm not listening, I'm missing their crumble cookies, right? I'm missing what is going on there that we might be able to fix. Because I'll be honest, sometimes we do go back to our clients and say, you know what? We probably should fix this for the neighbors. Okay, it might cost you X, but this is what's going to get you over the hurdle, right? Yep.
And that's what makes the project better too, for that matter. They pointed out something on paper, or us, as best as we know, we don't live there. Like I always tell folks, like, I don't live there, right? So they do know things I don't know, because they drive past this every day, or they're walking the site every day. So I feel like it's like they sometimes know that better step, and it elevates like the project. But like you said, you got to take the time to like listen. Yeah. I think that's so key. It's the human connection that I think is so important, that we take our knowledge, our know-how, our skills, right? But really apply it and understand that at the end of the day, it's humans, right? That we are affecting the world and creating a better place for them to live in, to play in, right? And so I love that. So and like you said, it really was, that's what amazed me so much, because it literally was probably a 15 seconds out of a 20-minute story I shared with you about our whole entire thing. And you remembered like the brand, the cookies, and I just couldn't, I was floored by the whole situation. So You're an amazing person, and I admire you for so many directions of what you do, even stand-up comedy. I can't believe you do that. I would die and never, ever
Oh, it's horrifying.
die.
It's horrifying.
I wouldn't even try. Right. But the fact that you put yourself out there and do that, I love it, and keep challenging yourself. So thanks so much for being on the Lōkahi
Thank you for having
Backstage
me.
Podcast. And it's been awesome. And I look forward to all our future ahead.
Absolutely. No, thank you for this, and looking forward to working together.
Mahalo to our listeners for joining us today. Until next time, remember to lean into who you are created to be. Your journey is uniquely yours, and the world needs you.